One of the main points of our book that we wrote in 2018 was that the way that democracies die today is at the ballot box. That's a much more frequent way that democracies die, no longer through military coups and attacks of generals. And so if elections die at the ballot box, then it's really critical to have free and fair elections. And what we're seeing across U.S. states right now is an assault on voting rights. And so I think the biggest threat facing American democracy today is that 2020 may have been a dress rehearsal for what's to come in 2022 and 2024. And so when people challenge the basic legitimacy of free and fair elections, democracy is in a very precarious position.
Some Americans might hear this and say, oh, it sounds like media hype. You know, I went to the grocery store today, nothing's changed. I voted in my local election, nothing's changed. How are they supposed to know that something is changing?
Well, again, this is one of the most striking things, is that when one looks at this process around the world, democracies die very slowly. Often voters don't even notice what's happening around them. You know, 10 years into Hugo Chavez's presidency, there was a survey done in Venezuela, and the majority of Venezuelans thought they still lived in a democracy. Now, we're in a very different situation here in the United States. I mean, you know, our electoral institutions at the end of the day did work in November, but we can't be vigilant enough is sort of the main message I would send.
The Washington Post reported that Biden had been recommending your book to others and taking notes in the sides of the pages. Have you spoken with him about these concepts?
No, I have not directly.
It seems like it might be useful. What do you hope that he learned or picked up from the book?
Well, I think it's really important to understand the scale of the threats, that we're not alone in the world in facing these threats, and to also recognize that dramatic transformations in our institutions are necessary. Democracy requires constant mending. And so we can't just simply stand still and assume that democracy is a machine that runs of itself. We need to reform our institutions, and I think this is something that the Biden administration is alert to, and the idea of protecting voting rights is hard, grinding work, and it may even take more than just one election cycle. It may take a decade, but there needs to be a dramatic reform movement to protect our democracy. The reason American democracy thrived in the 20th century is because at the beginning of the 20th century, we reformed our democratic institutions and under Woodrow Wilson, the progressive era, and I think we need a new reform movement today.
And what is the role of the reality-based media, the small d democratic media, in trying to preserve a democratic system?
Democracy is a kind of self-correcting mechanism. I mean, when politicians go too far to the extremes, the way it's supposed to work is that voters punish those politicians. But in order for that self-correcting mechanism to work, there needs to be a free flow of information and true information and real understanding of what's happening. And I think the concern I have is that so many voters have insulated themselves from information and sort of operating in echo chambers. And so this self-correcting mechanism of our democracy can't work because voters don't even really quite understand what's happening if they don't listen to real news and instead rely on misinformation.
Or just outright propaganda. And as Kyung was saying, it's so powerful. It's so intoxicating. I don't know if, real news can compete with a bunch of propaganda BS.
Well, I think that's the challenge of journalism. I mean, journalism is a profession, right? And I think one of the great things that you just described in the last segment there was an effort to kind of make the system work. And in a free society, we don't want to have state-regulated media. So in order to have this operate successfully, we need to have journalists who stick up for their profession standards and spread information and knowledge in a way that makes our system work.
Daniel Ziblatt, thank you very much. The book is How Democracies Die, and even though it's a troubling look at what's going on, it is important to read. Thank you for being here.